Okay. For a movie where absolutely nothing happens, there is so much dumb shit that I'm gonna sink my teeth into in this episode. Now, this movie is a bit like The Shining in the sense that it's made to seem like a lot is going on, but really, there isn't that much at all. But also, like The Shining, it would also be so much better if they deleted the supernatural shit. But the supernatural shit might as well not exist in this film because it's so paper thin, it's almost a theory in itself, if any of it's even real. The film is self described as a supernatural psychological horror. The sequel's playing to the supernatural shit. So this movie is a supernatural film, no matter what you want to say otherwise. So any theory of the supernatural not being real is wrong. Although, if your movie is called a supernatural film, you've got to at least acknowledge that and play into it a little bit to actually call it a supernatural film. You might as well put it in there somewhere. The sequels and the genre choice make no sense though, especially because this film is just another slasher film in disguise. And why do I say that? Stick around and find out, motherfucker! So, plot synopsis. Well, not really plot synopsis, because this goes on for fucking ages. Plot explanation. So at the start of the film, there's this sort of info dump. And I'm literally just going to read it out to you guys just now, because this is one of the most poignant parts of what I'm going to discuss in this episode. In October of 1994, three student filmmakers disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, while shooting a documentary. A year later, their footage was found. Fucking hell, I like my documentary voice. Anyways, now after reading that to you, I want you to try and keep that in mind here. Please hold all theories till the end of the ride, please. This movie is so bad at being a supernatural film. But anyways, so the film is found footage, which obviously means it's set up to look like the characters are filming themselves. What it really means here is the excuse for the camera to shake so much every time anything happens that the audience gets to see none of it. But this film is credited as being the first and most important film to do the whole found footage thing. Firstly, no. Cannibal Holocaust was a movie that did it almost 20 years prior and also did the whole found footage thing so much better. It wasn't the first film to do the whole found footage technique though, however. But who really cares who did it first? It's just fucking lazy. You didn't want to hire an actual camera crew, just admit it. But Cannibal Holocaust is also a much better horror film than this shit for many reasons. It's still shit. And I will probably do an episode on it in the future. But then again, who has actually seen Cannibal Holocaust in full? Apart from a few nutcase fans of horror, who only kid themselves by saying it's the most fucked up film of all time. Apart from them, who has actually seen it? And who has just seen the YouTube videos about it? Also, about it being the most fucked up film, it really isn't, and that's another annoying horror trend that comes up in the horror genre. The trend of movies only being liked because they're so messed up, so fucked up, but then you go and actually watch them, and 9 times out of 10, they're not even that bad. Whereas Cannibal Holocaust is that 1 out of 10, and that's not because it's necessarily a scary film. As a film itself, it's no more messed up than most of the video nasties of the 70s, which, to be honest, a lot of them are genuinely fucked up. If you find shit like the Blair Witch Project scary, I genuinely don't think you're ready for this shit. But what makes Cannibal Holocaust that 1 out of 10 is the making of the film and the fact that during the film there is actual live scenes of animals being brutally murdered. And these include a pig, a monkey, a snake, and a turtle. And it's quite brutal to watch, especially when you consider this is meant to just be a horror film, not reality. But a lot of the movie DVD edits of Cannibal Holocaust have all that shit removed. So, in this sense, it makes it nowhere near as dark or fucked up as it was. And using that logic now, seeing the scenes have been removed, The Crow is a much more fucked up film than this because the star of the film was fucking killed on set. Also, when I saw it, I didn't know any of this shit, but in all honesty, it'll be a brutal rewatch. But even with that, there is so much worse. Like Cannibal Holocaust may be brutal, but there's so much worse. I'm not recommending any because I don't want to be demonetized or removed, and at the same time, I don't want to watch any of these fucking films either because they're fucking horrible to watch. But you have the internet at your disposal, so if you're really into horror and you want to just genuinely torture your mind, then feel free to go look into it. But if you're really into horror, you might rethink your stance after seeing some of these because they will make you genuinely want to puke uncontrollably just from their descriptions, let alone the whole film. And then they will throw your nerves up higher than you have ever experienced in your life. But believe me, there is no enjoyment here, just absolute emotional agony. But if that's what you're into, then feel free to go and Google it. There's all sorts of lists online that have all the most disturbing movies of all time. And in all honesty, Cannibal Holocaust is nowhere near the top. It's low hanging fruit in comparison. But back to the conversation at hand, and Cannibal Holocaust as an episode of this channel is not really a high priority. It can wait. Also, I really don't want to waste time of my life watching that shit. But I digress. Another reason I bring up Cannibal Holocaust is because before I go into the plot of the Blair Witch, I've got to discuss the marketing of the film. Because if this film wasn't marketed in the way it was, nobody would know what this film was. This would be another shitty 90s film lost to time. But the template for this film's marketing was set out using the template the Cannibal Holocaust set out 20 years ago. So to cut a long story short, the director of Cannibal Holocaust made all the actors sign contracts not to show their faces in public for an entire year after the film's release. And this built up such a stir and caused so much panic that the guy who directed the film actually ended up on trial for murder because people thought the deaths in the film were real and that he had orchestrated their deaths like this was some sort of snuff film that had been filmed. Now, with Cannibal Holocaust finally out the way, I've got to say that the marketing on the film, Blair Witch I'm talking about now, where it takes the template of Cannibal Holocaust and takes it to the next logical step, is actually a pretty clever marketing strategy, objectively. Like, honestly, there is a reason why this is studied in universities, as the marketing really transcends the film entirely. So, the film was actually one of the first films to take advantage of the internet, and because of this, the film had its own designated website, which actually launched the year before the film's release, which featured fake police reports as well as news reports discussing the history of the Blair Witch and the 3 missing film students, with timelines for everything, as well as shots taken from the tape and the film reels of the recordings. But the most important and intriguing thing here is that they actually found Heather's diary, which describes before and during the trip to the woods, what happened, how she felt, her actions, and how everyone else feels, and the actions of them as well. I must quote as well, the last words of the journal are, "I want to laugh." Yeah, so do I. Hey, only so long until the map part, guys. That shit sends me into hysterics. But anyways, another thing is, these actors actually share the same name as their on-screen characters. This is because it heightens the realism factor. The actors were also completely wiped away from the public spotlight to add to the realism for the movie. This is why I mentioned Cannibal Holocaust and discussed it so much a minute ago. Missing posters were also designed for the three actors and put up all across America. All information online regarding the actors was chalked up to being missing, presumed dead. There was also fake interviews with fake relatives to the characters. There was also a fake documentary on the history of the Blair Witch released a week before the film's release, discussing the witch's formation, the mystery surrounding her, and the mysterious disappearances in the town of Burkittsville. Now, I've spent a good minute rimming the people behind the marketing of this film, but in hindsight, this is a great example of right place, right time. If this came out today, it would have been debunked in moments by some losers on Reddit. But no, it came out in 1999 when the popularity of the internet was only just beginning to explode in popularity, and this film capitalized heavily on that, using the internet to its advantage. If it came out earlier, the directors would have been arrested. If it came out today, it would be debunked, ridiculed, and torn apart for even attempting something like this. But because it was one of the best examples of the right place and the right time, this movie was set to be one of the biggest films of the year, and in fact, one of the biggest films in all of horror. With that out of the way, the movie starts and we meet Heather, who is probably the most annoying fictional film student ever. She wants to make a documentary film about an urban legend called the Blair Witch. Her goal is to find out whatever evidence she can possibly find to prove it real. But of course, she can't do this alone, so she calls up her friend Josh, who she clearly knows because Bro gets the name of Mr. Punctuality. I actually fucking love that nickname for some reason. It's just so funny. I don't know why. But yeah, those are words actually spoken in this film. Also, let's be honest. Of all the people to get that nickname, Bro doesn't deserve it. Anyways, she calls Josh up so he can run the cameraman duties. And while we don't really know that much about Josh prior to the film, we know they clearly know each other. Realistically, they're probably both just film students, but who knows, maybe they have more history. Who the fuck knows? And who the fuck cares? But Josh has also brought his friend Mike. Well, I say brought. They have to go and pick him up. He hasn't brought him. Heather has never met Mike, but Mike's job is to work the sound on the project. Just throw some 808s over the top, bro, and it'll be a blast. But why am I focusing on the characters more than the witch? Bro, the witch might as well be non-existent. To the point where the only way this movie can work is if the witch doesn't actually exist. But it's still supernatural. Ooh, so the witch does clearly exist. Let me continue. So Heather, Josh and Mike, after getting all acquainted with each other, head up to the town of Burkittsville. On the way, they stop at a grocery store and buy some sort of shitty food and obviously alcoholic beverages. They then head up to Burkittsville, which was initially named Blair, but changed its name due to disappearances due to the witch. Apparently. So they filmed their first scene for their documentary film, which is atrociously bad. Honestly, I get these guys are film students, but this is awful. They really should do better. Like, Heather is terrible in front of a camera. After that, they interview the townsfolk, and the way it's shown in the film is like this scene is a finished and edited scene from the documentary film they've filmed. They all tell differing stories that are mostly all quite brutal, but are all quite bullshit. Some suggest the witch. A woman says she saw something on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but... No, shut up. Another says she has always believed in witches and believes they are all around us. And then they contrast these stories with a few other people who tell the story of a crazed child killer from the 40s who was apparently terrorized by the witch and was only promised to be left alone after killing the kids. All of them are almost definitely bullshit trying to bring losers like Heather into this lonely little town. But one of them suggests a woman named Mary Brown, who is this apparent crazy old eccentric woman. Actually, stop the tape. Somebody should play a drinking game in this episode for every single time I say the word apparently. Take a drink every time I say the word apparently in this episode. By the time it's finished, none of you will remember what movie I was talking about. Forget that. You'll forget you were even listening to this. Back to the story. They drive to Mary Brown's place, which is this old trailer north of Burkittsville, nearer the woods. They interview Mary Brown, and she describes a story where she had an encounter with the Blair Witch, allegedly. See what I did there? I'm trying here. When she was a child, out fishing with her dad. She also describes the Blair Witch. The Blair Witch apparently looks like a woman, but is very hairy. She describes her as looking like a horse. The Blair Witch is a furry. What is it with horror films and furries? Yeah, they don't believe her. Honestly, I don't believe her either. And I've been out in the woods multiple times, and I've been out fishing multiple times, hiking and all sorts. And things that happen in the woods are strange, but that's the thing about the woods. All the wildlife around you. You may feel at peace, but you're never alone. The poor child probably saw a furry, which I don't blame her for going all eccentric for. But saying that, her acting in this scene was much better than Heather's throughout most of the film. But with all that said, it was obvious it was all an act. Then they all fuck off to some cheap hotel with 2 beds in it. Bear in mind, there's 1 woman and 2 men. 2 beds. I'm not a rocket scientist, but after getting drunk together, smoking dope, and casually sleeping together, they all head up towards the woods the next day. And this is when the movie actually begins. Well, I say begins. Next to nothing is going to happen for a while here. More has happened at the beginning than what will happen during most of the time in the woods. They head up north of Burkittsville, and they meet a couple of fishermen on the way to the woods who tell a story about a woman in the 1800s who just walked off into the woods but then appeared back again, babbling some bullshit about an old woman whose feet don't touch the ground. One of them also saw mist rise from the water, apparently. They also, in a very moronic fashion, tell them that the woods are haunted. Yeah, like that matters to these dumbass college students who have already travelled this far. Now, of course it matters. They packed up their shit and they went home. The film is over, the episode is over, good night and thanks for listening. Nah, of course they continued heading into the forest. Their location is a place called Coffin Rock. After walking for a bit, they find it, and it's a nice area actually. Nice little place by the river. But of course, being annoying film students, they had to ruin that beautiful moment of nature by deciding it would be an interesting time to film Heather reading some dogshit story from a book she brought that discusses 5 men that are brutally murdered at this location, apparently. Yeah, they were all bound together, one man's hands to the other man's feet. Kinda sounds like something out of the Human Centipede. This shit inspired Human Centipede. Fuck that shit. But these guys had their intestines spilled and shit carved into their faces. These bodies were found by some people who ran away straight away and got the police. But by the time they got back, their bodies were gone. You'll understand at the end why I'm going into every one of these stories, but I'll sum it up by saying they're all clearly dogshit stories somebody made up for clout and attention. Also, I am really just going into them because the stories have more to them than 90% of the entire film. Also, the whole, they found the bodies, but they were then removed by the time you got to show anyone cliche. Yeah, talk about annoying, overdone cliches. Holy shit. That's at least top 3 most annoying horror cliches. They then camp up for the night and hear some shit during the night, but don't think much of it because they're in the woods. It could have been anything. But bro apparently heard cackling. Did you know? The next day, they talk some shit for a bit, and then we witness the only death in the whole film. Well, it's not the only death, but it's the only death we actually get to see. It's a fucking mouse. It's literally a mouse. Yes, the only death in the film we actually get to see is a fucking mouse. How did it die? Witchcraft, obviously. Come on. Unlike everyone else who is suffering through this film, who is dying of boredom, this mouse got the honour of being killed by the witch herself. Their next location is an abandoned cemetery, but here comes the real comedy of the Blair Witch Project. Mike hints at the best parts of the film here when he realises Heather hasn't really been using the map, and instead she has spent a lot of time aimlessly dragging the guys on a paperless trail, which ends up getting them a bit frustrated about where they might be. Yeah, to skip ahead a bit, there isn't much I can say about the map argument scenes that everybody else hasn't already said, apart from they are just accidentally a scene that could have been taken out of a really bad teen comedy show. They do drag on like fucking hell, but they have some fucking hilarious moments. Like when Mike just goes apeshit and decides he's throwing the map away. But that's a spoiler I've just given away for later. Speaking of later on that day, they walk across a fallen tree that was their only pathway across a river. If only they fell in and ruined their footage, then this shit wouldn't have to exist. But then they found the old abandoned cemetery, which is less of a cemetery and more just a pile of rocks. It then skips to night, and after spending some time talking shit around the campfire, they head back to the cemetery for more footage. And this is where Josh accidentally knocks over one of the cairns. I'm assuming they're cairns, it's just literally a pile of rocks. But Heather then goes and fixes it, being very skeptical about things. Speaking of Heather later on that night starts hearing things in the woods and starts yelling at them. Whatever it is in the woods, she starts yelling at it like a fucking moron. I mean, these guys are all dumbasses. Let's just be real here. But Heather is clearly spooked out of her mind by this. And being convinced that after Josh knocking over one of the cairns, that she's summoned some sort of supernatural entity, Heather fucking shits herself. Anyways, the next day, she reflects on it a bit by saying she thinks she heard something, but a couple of days in the woods does that to you in all honesty. Josh tries to calm her down by saying it's probably someone fucking with her. This guy is honestly awful at trying to calm down a woman. I hope he doesn't have a girlfriend. Actually, he does have a girlfriend. He mentions it in the film. I feel sorry for her. But secondly, like who? They're in the middle of the woods. They're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Who's fucking with them, bro? Who's fucking with them? Are you fucking with them? Nah, surely not. Anyways, he then asks Heather, have you seen Deliverance? Also no. Heather has clearly not seen Deliverance. Mike clearly has though, and he's sitting there all paranoid that they've pissed off the locals or something. And due to this is when they finally decide to try to head back. But they can't seem to find their way back, and it's almost like the surroundings are constantly changing for them, or they're just wandering in circles. And whether that is supernatural or not, it's clear that Heather is just terrible at orienteering. even though she's got a fucking map. Speaking of that map, this is when the events of the film actually kick in. And what might that mean? Does the witch show face and start terrorizing the guys? Does one of them disappear without a trace? Does one of them out theirself as a wannabe killer? Does anything scary happen whatsoever? Fuck it, I've spoilt it already. I couldn't help myself by talking about the maps. It's comedic as fuck, and really it's only funny because of how serious everybody in this film is about it. Yeah, literally, the bulk of what's left of this movie is spent listening to these whiny assholes argue about where they are, how useless Heather's directional skills are, and how useless the map is. I'm not joking. Literally most of this film is just these three arguing. It's one of the greatest, most influential horror films of all time, apparently, and the bulk of it is spent listening to these three whiny bitches bitching about a fucking map. The Blair Witch Mapping Project. That's the whole film summed up into a few words. A 2-hour walk then turns into a whole day and a night, and they hear some more shit during the night, and hell, it probably was the townfolk, or a deer or something. Dumbasses should have brought a rifle. They live in America. But this time, they all get spooked, as this time they all hear it. They all hear whatever is out there. The next morning, they find 3 piles of rocks outside their tent. Spooky. Imagine being scared by rocks. It's clearly not the witch. It's clearly someone fucking with them. Or maybe it's one of them. Who the fuck knows? But it's clearly not the witch. Imagine that. The witch has all of these powers and she decides to just put some rocks down. What the fuck are you playing at? But that's not even the real issue. The map is gone. This is truly tragic. Let's all take a moment for the map. And our sanity. Man, I felt more for that map than these characters combined. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but either way, I think when you're making a film that centers so much on a few characters that you should at least feel something for them. But realistically, they could be anyone. They're so indistinguishable from most college students at that time. They're just so annoying, and as laughable as it may be, I'm not kidding. I felt more when I found out the map was missing than at the end of the film. I keep giving spoilers, but actually, no, you guys can wait till the end to find out my opinions on the end of the film. But everyone blames Heather for it. They all give her all sorts of shit, and while there should be a lot of fault for Heather's failed responsibility with the map, she didn't actually lose it. It turns out it was actually Mike who took it off Heather and who decided to kick it into the creek. Mike has clearly lost his shit by now. But now they have all lost their shit by now, and understandably so. Heather is already incompetent with a map, but Mike has fucked them all so much more by booting it away. This represents the clear turning point with the characters, but even then, now they are just even whinier film students, and that's the true horror, if any. Film students are a scourge of my existence. Their whole lives revolve around shitty films, and if you don't like any of these shitty films they obsess over, as in films like this shit, or The Shining, then you're subhuman scum in their eyes. I've spent more than enough time in my life with film students to know that these scenes of Heather, Josh and Mike constantly arguing are almost symbolic of how annoying film students can actually be. Like seriously, nobody wants to watch this shit apart from you. Nobody wants to watch the Blair Witch Project. Nobody wants to watch The Shining. Nobody wants to watch this shit apart from you losers. Anyways, they then find some weird designs in the trees that were clearly made quite meticulously. Well, for being made of sticks and hung from trees, they are quite meticulously made. It is a little bit weird, but if somebody designed some headless stickmen using sticks randomly, that would be strange, but not creepy. I guess one could find it a little unsettling, but that's only because I've sat through what feels like hours of pointless filming and then, oh wow, here's some sticks. Like, I've seen some random bullshit that happens in the woods for what seems like hours. I could literally see anything different and be mesmerized by it. So no, that isn't a saving grace. That isn't the saving grace here. But anyways, that night, shit hits the fan, or a fan of some sorts, because their tent randomly gets shaken about by something. And this obviously freaks them out to shit, and they run off. Bye bye tent, gonna miss you bro, moment of silence for the tent. Okay, so I took a break from recording, and now it's day 2 of this shit. And now I feel like I'll start again by taking a break and say, for any potential sponsors, if you're a studio who produces films better than the films I discuss, I'd be happy for you to sponsor me. If you pay me money for it, I'll shout your shit out. If it's any good, that is. Hell, if you offer me enough, I'll probably shout out anyways. I'll do a designated episode about why your film sucks while you sponsor this show. Also, any microphone or sound equipment wouldn't hurt. I sound like shit, but you could help me out with that. I'll let you sponsor me. The honour of doing it is truly yours. Anyway, back to the episode. The next morning, after spending the night out, probably shitting themselves, they all head back to the camp to find that Josh's backpack has disappeared. Never mind mourning the tent though. Thankfully, it's okay. They also find some weird slimy shit because, I don't know, the Blair Witch decided she was bored and horny. I don't know. Don't want to know. But here I am speculating for your entertainment. You are very welcome. They find Josh's shit scattered, and Josh and Mike get pissed off at Heather for continuously filming them. They actually have quite a few times I just forgot to mention it. So there you go. But obviously, it's kinda understandable. You're going through the hell of being stuck in the woods with 2 other college students, and one of them is constantly walking around with a camera trying to make some sort of reality TV show off of your suffering. Typical filmmakers and journalists, am I right? Will do anything for a buck. Josh starts to lose it completely. They apparently walk back to the same log they found before, and this is when they came to realise they are probably walking in circles. Josh, later on, films Heather and gives her a bunch of shit. He riles Heather up until she breaks down entirely. Josh then keeps pushing her. It's hard not to feel for her here, but it's hard not to feel for any of them in this moment. They are all out of their minds. That night, they reminisce of home a bit, before waking up the next morning to find Josh has left them, which is probably not the worst thing that could have happened. He was the first one that truly lost it. It's for the best he's gone. I don't know why you would be upset by him leaving. Maybe he got out on his own, who the fuck knows? Hell, he probably did. Or maybe there is something else at play here to his disappearance. Who the fuck knows? Josh and Heather contemplate where to head, east or west. They choose west and then set up camp and further reminisce about life before heading to the woods. That night, they think they hear Josh, and they run straight out of their tents and start yelling like mad, trying to find him, but they never find him. Is that because the witch has taken over his body and he's actually dead? In this case, probably maybe. Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck cares at this point? They finally, after a while, head back and discuss whether it was actually Josh or not. Then they wake up again the next morning to find a pile of sticks tied together with Josh's bloodied shirt. She moves it away. Heather moves it away, scared shitless by it. Yeah, Josh is fucked. Or is he? Yeah, that pile of sticks being a worthy plot point meant she had to later on that day go and check it out again after moving it away. And after looking deeper into it, this is where she finds the rest of his shirt wrapped up, dripping blood, and holding what looks to be a mixture of hair and a tongue, all drenched in blood. Yeah, she did him pretty good. People say that they can see teeth here, but I don't think so. There's something that kinda resembles a tooth, but looks next to nothing like one when you examine it. She chooses not to tell Mike. They walk a bit further, Mike gets peckish and eats a leaf, and then that night, Heather decides to record herself apologising to everyone close to Mike, Josh and herself, and single-handedly puts the blame on herself, and although this is the most popular scene in the whole film, and although it's one of the most parodied and made fun scenes in all of cinema, it's a little bit of a shame because this scene could have been quite a powerful scene. But it did itself no favours by making the focal point of the scene Heather's nose. Yeah, the snot scene in Scary Movie just did what we were all thinking. She then expresses how scared she is by admitting furthermore that she believes she will die out here. Later on, Mike and Heather hear Josh in the distance and go out looking for him again. But instead of finding him, they find something they genuinely wouldn't have expected. A house. Which turns out to be the actual abandoned house of the child killer mentioned at the start of the film. But it's still a house, so yay, I guess? The place is in ruins, they have a look throughout the house, and then they further hear Josh's voice again, sending them up a flight of stairs to find handprints from the children, and then they hear him again down in the basement. This is when Mike heads down the stairs to the basement, and then he presumably sees Josh and drops his camera in shock, giving Heather the incentive to walk down to then be greeted by Mike standing in the corner of the basement room facing the wall, all before Heather is thrown to the ground and presumably killed. Or who the fuck knows? Probably was killed, but who the fuck knows? Let's be honest, nobody really knows what happened. Yeah, that's the Blair Witch Project. Almost as much as a snorefest as The Shining, but done in half the time. It's almost impressive when you think of it. Now this movie leaves so much to be desired and was so devoid of anything that could spark interest to anyone, that most horror fans after watching it thought, oh wow, this would be so much better if the two guys just tricked Heather into all of this shit just to kill her. And yeah, of course it would. If the ending took a massive curveball and it turned out it was Mike and Josh, and you had a full-on Scream-type ending where they both get revealed as the witch, that would be awesome. But no. Mike just stands in front of Heather, looking at the wall, and then bang! Heather's dead. It's a purposefully uneventful ending to an extremely uneventful film. So, back to the start again. Why did I read out the introduction to the film at the start? Because after all the shit that happened in the film, the rocks, the sticks, Josh disappearing, the sound of Josh when he wasn't there, apparently, and then the apparent deaths of all three of them by the hands of the witch, apparently. How are you all doing at that drinking game anyways? If this was the witch's doing, how is it so easy for randoms to just waltz in a year later and recover the footage all willy-nilly without any issues? And then consider what happened to the men at Coffin Rock, how they all were killed brutally just for people to find them and be able to get back afterwards. This movie is one of the worst supernatural movies ever. From a logical standpoint especially. The witch exists, bro. For real. Yeah, what evidence do you have? A bloody shirt, some sticks, a pile of rocks, and a film camera, and a video camera with footage of 3 missing people who clearly went apeshit on each other. All it really shows is that these 3 were here, no sign of the witch throughout it, but they were here. So it can add to the mythos of all the creepy random shit that happened in these woods, but just like everything else that happened in the woods, there is next to no evidence other than the crazy child killer probably being real, as evidenced by the apparent fact that he was sent to prison for his crimes. But apart from that, there is no evidence here for anything happening whatsoever, even on the camera footage. It's sketchy at best, which is why the theories for this film, and what really happened, all come back to the same conclusion. Josh and Mike are the killers, and they brought Heather out here to kill her. And throughout the synopsis, explanation, I spent forever calling the film a fucking synopsis. I spent 40 odd fucking minutes calling it a synopsis. Plot explanation, not a synopsis. What a moron I am. But anyways, I've tried to subtly nudge you all on this theory by highlighting Josh and Mike getting mad at Heather and Heather not knowing Mike as just a couple of examples of why they may have killed her. Hey, in horror films, that's all you need. And then, with the completely ambiguous ending, it feels almost obvious to some that this is the case, and for a while it was for me too, until the even worse sequels came out. Just don't waste your time. It's a well-known fact that for every decent horror movie sequel, there's 20 shitty sequels from other franchises. Honestly, I shouldn't waste my time warning you. If you're stupid enough to watch these sequels, then it's too late for you. You're already lost. But realistically, this theory is stupid too. It's quite hard to make this film make sense without evidencing... Evidencing? Is that a word? I don't care, I'm fucking Shakespeare now. Without evidencing massive plot holes that fuck everything up. Heather is the one that orchestrated the trip. Heather was the one who led everyone to each location and furthermore led them all astray. Everything that was happening was essentially Heather's doing. So unless Josh and Mike are somehow the embodiment of the witch, and they wrote all these books and told all these stories that Heather has then went on to read, then how the fuck did they convince Heather to come out here? A lot of people like to point out that the guys were, quote, dismissive to Heather early on, but that's because she led them off map a few times and went straight into orienteering mode, even though she was no good at it whatsoever, as evidenced by her getting everyone lost. But have any of you guys ever been on a hike or went orienteering? I have. Almost every time I have, there has been at least a couple of arguments like this. So yeah, in this sense, the Blair Witch Project is a film that makes me reminisce of those times. I miss hiking. I miss orienteering. I really should go and do it again. But anyways, in conclusion, the Blair Witch Project, although like The Shining, it may have its moments, but unlike The Shining, these moments are not scary. These moments are comedic genius. Like the scene where Mike admits to kicking the map away. It's unintentionally one of the funniest things I've seen in something that's not a type of comedy film. But apart from that, this movie is a whole lot of ideas mixed together that comes out with absolutely nothing in total. For the amount of shit that I've talked about in this episode, nothing really happens at all. They visit the woods, get mad about being lost, get mad about a map, find some weird looking sticks and stones, and then one of them gets killed by their fellow campers. The end. I really had to analyse and dig deep to make this episode as interesting as I could, which is why I brought out the theories. But another thing I forgot to mention is the fact that this movie brought the whole found footage thing into the spotlight so studios can make millions off of cheap, plotless crap just like this. It's just another cog in the wheel that ran over and crushed the horror genre dead. Fuck all that shit. The only outlier I can remember from the time is the Spanish film Wreck, which is a decent 28 Days Later type zombie film shot from the view of a TV reporter locked in an apartment building. It also has an American remake, which isn't actually terrible either. It's renamed Quarantine, but it's just really Wreck, the remake. Don't neglect the original though. Quarantine is a pretty faithful sequel though, and I'm really just mentioning Quarantine because I know some people can be turned off by listening to other languages and having to watch something by reading subtitles. But then again, I'm sure a lot of you losers also watch all that Japanese horror too, so get over it. But apart from Wreck, this shit is absolute garbage. Fuck Paranormal Activity. I know it's the most profitable film ever, but just because it's profitable doesn't mean it's any good. Most people like bad shit. That's why McDonald's is a thing, and just like McDonald's, it's cheaply made crap with no substance whatsoever. It's like somebody sat down and thought, how could we make Blair Witch, but even more tedious and boring? Maybe I'll suffer through Paranormal Activity for an episode one day, but not today. Not anytime soon. I couldn't physically stay awake last time I was forced to watch it. I don't know how this time would be any better. But honestly, unless you were around at the time, nobody remembers any of these movies. We're all lucky enough to have lived past that time. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. The Blair Witch Project sucks, and it isn't scary. So firstly, if you've made it this far, I genuinely do appreciate it. Thank you so very much, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Suggestions for films you'd like to see me cover in the future are always welcome, and if you've made it this far, I appreciate that in itself. But if you feel so inclined, then please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out and gives me even more of a reason to make these videos. I am doing these mainly for my own entertainment, but if you can gain something from that, then that's all that matters. Also, I know I promised a Halloween episode, but I just sat down with the idea of doing a few different films at once, and Blair Witch was the one that just came quite naturally, and that's not because Halloween is a great film. The shit is terrible, and it's the single most overrated slasher film ever. This film saturated the slasher genre, and it's honestly one of the most boredom-inducing films I've ever seen. But talking about the next episode, I'm sick of these self-indulgent snorefests. I need something more fun, more gory, action-packed, and fun to dig into. I'm not going to mention the next episode because it could be a couple of movies, but with that criteria, it could be anything. So tune in next time for another killer episode of Horror Movies Suck and They Aren't Scary. Peace!